Hey, what's going on, Sundan Lotion?
I'm man, not a whole lot, Mr. Mathersby.
I
Just hanging out. How are you?
like it, man. So, how's your week going, buddy?
Finally, it's going good. I think I told you about it, but we ended up getting pretty much hit by that tornado.
Yeah.
Dude, that thing came right across our house, and we have like our whole fences down, and neighbors have roofs off. I say roof shingles and all that stuff. So we've been working, man, last week and this week, and get kind of getting everybody squared away. We kind of live in a neighborhood full of older people, so we've been doing that. But man, God was good and He blessed us, so we are squared away now.
Cool, man. Yeah, it was scary. Like, I think that it was all over the place, like down in Mississippi, and we got it bad here too. So, um, I don't I don't think we had any tornadoes, but like we have bad wind here anyway. And like that night, I mean, the winds got to like, I don't know, 65 or 70 miles an hour or something like that. It was pretty nasty.
I know we got to the point. It was getting so bad here. We ended up just saying things like "weeping willow," and
Yeah.
I remember at one point we were laying there and kind of kept hearing that wind coming, and I said, "Jumping Jehoshaphat's." I didn't want to be
Oh
too
yeah.
vulgar with everything, but
Yeah, it gets pretty scary to where you have to use language like that. So,
yeah, the
you know,
kids were
and
like,
I don't blame you, and I'm sure, the kids don't blame you, and
I did beg their forgiveness after it was over with. I said so.
I'm
So I think
glad.
we're
I'm
fine.
glad you did. Yeah. Well, with that, are you ready to build a bar?
Let's do it.
All right, so before we jump in here, I'm kind of disappointed in you tonight because I have the trusty little glasses on and you haven't made fun of me one time.
I haven't got to there yet. I haven't got to the point of the show where I make fun of you.
Okay, fair
You
enough.
got to give me time.
All right, so this is about the time where I would say, what have you brought for us? But we're going to do things a little different tonight and next week. We're going to take a break from making you, making our listeners put specific bottles on their bar, and we're just going to lightly talk about the top five whiskeys or bourbons that we're drinking right now and why. And so I kind of want to set the precedence for this episode and next episode. We're not talking about the five of our favorite whiskeys, even or five of our favorite bourbons, even though they could be our favorites. It's not five of the best under 50 or over 50. It doesn't Price doesn't have anything. Availability doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just, what are we drinking on right now that we want to share with each other and kind of talk about. So, with that being said, this episode is going to be about you and the five bourbons or whiskeys that you are drinking on right now. And let's talk a little bit about why you're drinking them, why you chose them. Um, but before we do that, let's cheers and let's get this episode started right.
Let's do it.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm surprised you're even asking me what my five are. I'm surprised you couldn't see what they are.
I
See what I did there?
see what you did there.
You know, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna. I'm not gonna name them all right now, but I do want to start with, and I will say this. I always lean back on this, right? In the in,
Mhm.
in the great words of the great theologian Morgan Wallen, I'll always lean back on the bourbon, right?
Mhm.
And so we got to pause this for 2 seconds. I got my superintendent calling. Hang on 1 second.
You know I'm not going to pause it, right?
Yes, sir. This one is honestly probably one of my favorites, my go-tos, but Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. And I will
Okay.
say Evan Williams Bottled and Bond because I won't go into like all the detail of the distillation process and the aging process and the backstories because we've done all that. But what I will go into is a little bit of my story on how I even got involved in Evan Williams was so back in 2009, I just got off my second deployment and a friend of mine had bought me this 1.75 liter of Evan Williams. And I started to drink it and I referred to it ignorantly then as a poor man's Jack. And I didn't mean any disrespect at the time, but I was just like, it's significantly less expensive than Jack, but it tasted so good. Well, as time went on, I kind of understood the difference in Tennessee whiskeys and bourbons and the whole nine. I got kind of into the taste process, but because it was so long ago, like when I taste Evan Williams now, I taste certain things. Like I'm not talking about like fruits and vegetables and herbicides and all that stuff. I'm talking about like whenever I taste that, it takes me back to a place. And one of those
Mm-hmm.
places that it takes me back to, even though we never drank this in Gatlinburg, you and I, it takes me back to a place to where you peed all over the campfire and you got drunk and peed all over the campfire. And so, a couple of episodes ago, you had told the listeners to ask me about this. And so we're playing the guitar and we're drinking and you got drunk and peed on the campfire.
What
Um,
I think you're telling was I the only one that got drunk that night?
I honestly, I was sitting there kind of a little bit of appalled at how
I
much my
feel like
brother. I
I
did
feel
have
like
a small
Heather.
glass of Kool-Aid. I did have that.
I feel like Heather might be able to tell this story better than you did. So the real story is, we were at this campsite, and there were within a stone's throw of us. There's probably 20 or 30 other campers, and as the night went on, the more you and I drank, the louder we got, and the more obnoxious we got, to the point that we were. This was probably what, 1 in the morning, maybe. We were shutting it down. And I, being the fiscally, like, just the most responsible, not
Yeah,
fiscally responsible, but just being the most responsible one, we had to put the fire out. So what do? You pee on the fire to get rid of it. So that's how that came about. It wasn't that I was just willy nilly peeing on things.
yeah,
That
it was
the fire had to
more of
be
a,
put out.
from an
So I was
entrepreneur standpoint.
right. I was the
Yeah,
response. Yeah.
well, you did it gracefully because you got down on one knee and peed on the campfire. So I will say it was graceful. That is one of my most favorite memories. And even though we were not drinking Evan Williams, that taste reminds me of, for lack of better words, pee on a campfire. It reminds me of those
Nice.
times in, playing the guitar in Gatlinburg and playing the guitar even in Fort Leonard Wood. And so that is why I go to Evan Williams as much as I do. It also reminds me of another place. Here in Arkansas, we have what's called the Buffalo National River, and it is
Hmm.
arguably one of my favorite places on the planet. And so my wife Courtney and I we went up there in 2020 with her dad and her grandpa and everything. And we spent the week up there and we fished and we canoed and we hiked and we did all these things. And every night we'd come home. And so like our cabin was here and theirs was here. And so we would meet in the middle. As the great theologian Diamond Rio said, we would meet in the middle.
Hmm.
And I would have my Evan Williams and Pop would have his gin and Courtney would have tequila and all that stuff. And so just that reminds me of those types of memoirs, so to speak.
Well, I don't want to hijack your episode, but there was this. I was looking, scrolling through Facebook one day, couple weeks ago, and I came across this post of this specific person was teaching this course on like sensory, you know, bourbon sensory kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And she said that, aside from the general, like, when you most people, it's like, I smell this and I'm smelling vanilla and caramel, and I taste it and I taste, dark caramel, whatever. What a lot of people do when they drink bourbon and whiskeys is it's not necessarily just about the flavors and the senses that they have at that moment, but it also sometimes brings you back to a certain time or place. And the example she gave was that this, I'm probably butchering this story, but it's something to this effect. Like, this lady was drinking bourbon one day, and she kept, every time she would drink this specific bourbon, she would think about her childhood. And the issue, like, her issue was like, I wasn't raised around this stuff. My parents didn't drink, so it's not like bourbon was in my childhood or anything, but it takes me back to this specific, like, summer where I was whatever. Well, come to find out, what was in the bourbon, one of the grains that was used had let off this aroma and this flavor of, some kind of like wildflower or something that, she would smell when she was like a little kid running through the fields and whatever. And without even putting the two together, without recognizing it, that bourbon, that flavor was taking her to a specific spot in her childhood, simply because the flavor and the smell was familiar to her from that time. And so, ever since I heard that story and read that, and I thought, it's, and I not later next episode when we talk about mine, it's a lot of that kind of stuff too. But it's not just about, the flavors and whatever. A lot of times it is about, taking you back to a time or place or people that you remember hanging
Exactly.
out with. And so, yeah, I mean, there's truth,
Relationship.
there's science behind that.
And that, which actually that leads me into my next one. It's kind of that same process because I never. So my next one is Balcones Baby Blue.
Hmm.
Now, arguably, that is. Here's the thing: you're going to hear me say that this is my favorite a lot. Have you ever heard the term that every dog is the best dog, and that's true?
Yeah.
It's true, man. Like every dog is a goodest boy, and it's there. Every one of them is true, and that's the
He's
same
a
thing.
good
Every
boy.
whiskey is the goodest boy, and it's all true.
Dude, I do that too, and people make fun of me often because it's like, I'll say, man, this is my favorite. And here's the thing. At the time I'm drinking this, like right now, I'm drinking one of my five picks, and it is my favorite right now. And
Later on, whenever you pour from one of your five, the different bottle, that's going to be your favorite at that. Yeah, dude, this is it for me. Like one of my favorites, or my favorite, or however you want to word it, because I got three more after this. My favorite is Balcones Baby Blue. And I've never had that until I got to Arkansas, which I got here in February of 17. You and I were talking, I think this was like 3 years ago, man. So I got this stuff, and it's a corn whiskey, right?
mhm.
So it's a corn. I think that it may have a little bit of barley in it. I can't remember. I think that I've done the episode, and for the life of me, I can't remember. But I think it's just a corn whiskey. It's a blue corn. Um, but one of the things that reminds me of, do you remember years ago, back in 2000 no, 2017, no, 2014 or 2017, when you and I got on our moonshine kick? You,
Right.
and everybody knows the story of how you got into it, but you got into it and you started like tasting the buttery corn, and then you and I went on these, like, we did these documentaries, and I did the music and all that stuff. When I
Hmm.
taste Balcones Baby Blue, I taste majority buttery corn. And when I taste that
Yeah.
buttery corn, I think about like the time that I drove to your house and I got there at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd been up for like 26 hours, and you're like, "Hey, try this, 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 and this." I was like, "All right." And then so, I was thinking like just a snort. Nope. Shot, 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 and shot. This is all the things that you had made. And so I remember going to bed at like 6 in the morning, feeling like I'd been hit and backed over by a dump truck because I was tired, and
Dude,
that
we
stuff.
have a history, because people don't know this, but because we podcast, and we're brothers, but we're so close and such good friends. But people don't realize this, but we see each other in person maybe one and a half times a year. So usually you'll come out and see me once. I'll go out and see you once, but it's 8 or 10 months apart usually. But we have a history of doing this, and I don't know if you remember this, but the very last time I came to see you, Heather and I showed up at your place. We got there. I don't know. It's probably 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and within an hour, you and I had sampled like 20 different. I mean, not only stuff that we made or whatever, but it was like here's a bottle that I bought. Here's a bottle. Here's a bottle. And within like an hour, we were both toasted, and Heather and Courtney got so mad at us because we were literally there an hour, and both of us were like blitz because
We
we were
were,
tasting.
but
So
that's the
that's
thing though, that they don't like for the listeners. We don't set out to like, "Oh, we're gonna get drunk tonight." It's just
right.
it's in the cards, man. Like we have 57 bottles that we have to try tonight,
Yeah,
and
we have to try them within the first hour.
we kill it at minute mark 57. And so, but that's what some of that stuff reminds me of is like those things where it's like, dude, because like I think at that time you had made like this cherry whatever cherry aged whiskey or whatever, and so we did all that. So when I taste that corn, I taste I taste like every bottle has like a year for me or a
Mhm.
year's marker for me, and that's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
except for Early Times Bottled and Bond, which is my number three, does not have anything like that. Early Time Bottled and Bond doesn't have anything specific for me. It doesn't have anything like it reminds me of this or it reminds me of this. Early Times Bottled and Bond. I've always been an Early Times fan. I was at an Early Times regular straight whiskey in Altus back 15 years ago. But
Before Maverick.
before Maverick, I dude, every time I do this, he has to sit in here, and typically he's
Mhm.
always quiet, but today he's got a freaking basset mouth on him. I've always been a fan of Early Times, and then finding Early Times Bottle and Bond this past year, I was like, I have to try it, and it is absolutely phenomenal. And so a lot of these have probably been in my top five, or actually all of them but one have been in my top five for quite a while now. And there's a story behind all of them. You know what I mean? Like number four. Were you going to say something?
No, I was agreeing with you
Oh,
about the.
number four. And I'm going to say this, dude. Cuervito Vivo.
Mm,
I will have to say, I know that I throw out the F word a lot. Favorite or PH, however, wherever you're from. But Cuervito Vivo is my all-time favorite. Like hands down, all time. And here's why. It's really good. Don't get me wrong. It tastes phenomenal. But I'm a resurrection freak. I
mhm.
obviously I'm a believer, so there's that resurrection. But dude,
And
you
this is
have
2 days after Resurrection Sunday, so this is a good time to bring that up.
a good time to bring this up. Dude, you have a brand of whiskey that at one point, so a quick story, and I know that everybody's heard it, but Old Crow, General Ulysses S. Grant, one of his troops, wrote in to President Lincoln and was like, hey, our commander's a drunk. Well, what kind is he drinking? He drinks Old Crow whiskey every day. So Abraham Lincoln sent him a barrel of it. Over time, this stuff, it's kind of been lost and it became, whatever you want to call it. I used to drink that stuff all the time, man. Just, dude, I was a two striper, three striper. All I could afford was all I could afford. And it was
Mhm.
Old Crow whiskey. And Alan Jackson, he sang Old Crow whiskey and Hot 7 Up. And so I was drinking Old Crow. And then you brought this, and it's like the resurrection of Old Crow in its glorified body. And I was like, my gosh, this stuff is legitimately solid freaking gold. I'm a
Oh yeah.
sucker for a comeback story. So again, that's another one of those.
And I will say, I'll interject here for a second because um, that Dave, the guy that runs Glens Creek, I mean, he's a friend of mine, and and I discovered that distillery I don't know, a couple years ago, and So I've been down there a couple times and done some filming with him and whatever. But he's a stand up guy. Like what he's doing there, I mean, it's I don't mean this at all in the way it's going to sound, but you know he bought the Old Crow Distillery, the Old Crow Distillery, and what he's doing there is pretty amazing, and his operation is, you know, pretty, I won't say bare bones, meaning like whatever, but it's, you know, it's not, you know, Jim Beam by any means, but dude, he makes some phenomenal stuff, and he's one of those guys that look, he could say this. He could say, I need a cooker. I'm gonna go out and buy a garbage can and a a wood paddle, and he'll make a cooker out of it. I mean, he's like a genius when it comes to that kind of stuff. And whenever you come here, we're gonna go there one day and just to
Yeah.
look around and show you. But dude, it's like it's amazing that what that guy can do. It's like, you know, and so my hats off to them, and just like you said, the story of that Cuervito Vivo and all their other products are just pretty phenomenal
You
as well.
know, I'm gonna dog leg for a minute or dog lick for a second because you had mentioned beautifully. Hats off. I'm all about some trucker hats with said whiskey brands on them. I just wanted to, you talk about hats. I just wanted to kind of
Throw that plug in
throw
there. Yeah, oh
that
yeah,
plug in there because I'll rock them out. Um,
yeah.
no, and his product is great. I did watch your interview with him that I thought was beautifully put together. So I don't know who you paid to do it, but it was beautiful.
Because I can't do it. I had to get
Yeah,
somebody else
because
to
you
do it.
can't do it. No, but that just he's a very humble guy. He's a very
Yeah.
seems to be a very nice gentleman, and I can tell you this, man. I'm a sucker for a comeback story, man. And I think most Americans are. Most Americans are suckers for comeback. They just want to see the underdog survive. And when you can take a brand of whiskey that's all but dead, I'm not. I don't want to be disrespectful, and then come back like that, dude. I got
Hmm.
that. That's all day long. So
Well, and one of the things, and I'll say this, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody in the industry that does it because they all do it, but you'll have a brand, and I'm just going to say like Old Crow because we're talking about Old Crow, and I'm not pointing them out, but you'll have a brand like Old Crow that in its time was one product, and then it dies out for whatever reason, and then somebody else will pick up that the label. They'll literally buy the label for that. And so, like Jim Beam now owns the label for Old Crow, and so they put out Old Crow, and they never had the intention of making it the top shelf bourbon or top shelf whiskey that it was back in the day. But so to your point though, there are a lot of these products that back in the day were specific products that people loved and enjoyed, and now they're owned by other companies and with different marketing direction and whatnot. So and that's not the fault of anybody. It's just kind of the mark of doing business. But like you said, the Old Crow that you remember and the Old Crow that like Pawpaw, our great grandfather, would remember are two different products. You know what I mean?
absolutely, two different products, and I think that that's a super cool thing. That I think that probably now I don't know the science behind it. I'm not a scientist. I play with dirt all day long, so I think that probably for me, I think that it's cool because I'm a sucker for nostalgia, and it's
Hmm.
funny because that's probably why my middle name is Nostalgia. It's actually James Nostalgia Cumberland, and so I
Yeah,
think that that's probably why I was named like that is because I'm a
probably.
sucker for nostalgia. So whenever we're drinking, said product, it's almost like we are drinking like the newer version is probably the closest to say in the
Hmm.
1940s when Paw Paw was out at the woodshed because he didn't want to get his head cut off by Mama for sipping whiskey. He
Right.
was drinking Old Crow, and that's probably the closest thing that we got to what he tasted. Corn changes, grains change,
Sure.
you know. So, um, but I think that that's cool. But to lead
But
into
I want to say one more thing about this, and we
Yeah.
can move on. There are distilleries and distillers that are out there, and their number one goal is to make a good product and make it in mass and make it so that the world can enjoy it. And there's respectability in that. But there are other distillers, and I put Dave in this category. I have other friends, Royce Neely's in this category, Alan Bishop's in this category. There's plenty of other friends that I have in this category, but they are about not just mass producing, but to see how, for lack of a better term, how perfect they can make this whiskey and how much they can get out of the grains and how, they're into the creativity and art of it all. And so, like you said, there's some art in recreating something old and trying to get it, back to where it was. And, you take an old painting like a Leonardo da Vinci painting, and if you wanted to recreate it and you wanted to do it brushstroke by brushstroke, people do that. That's a thing. And I feel like in the whiskey bourbon industry, there are people like that want to really focus on the quality and maybe resurrecting something that's old, but was totally worth, investing the time and the resources to recreate something.
Oh,
You
dude.
know what I'm saying?
Well, and that kind of goes back to I'm not a mechanic by no means, but my father-in-law has this
But your dad is.
huh?
Your dad is.
Did you say your dad was? That's what I thought. I thought you said that. That's what I thought. I can't do anything like you can, and you and him can. Y'all are just two peas in a pod. But you know, my father-in-law, he took like a 1953 or 54, I can't remember, old pickup, and I think it's a Chevrolet. Um, and if I have it wrong, he'll punch me in the face, and that's okay. But he took this and he sanded it down, and he repainted it. He redid the whole entire engine. He put all new seats in there. I mean, the whole nine. The whole nine. And dude, it's cool because for him, this is something I did. This is something I built. I restored. I did this. But for me, it's like I think this is cool because this is like a piece of the '50s that's been
Mm-hmm.
restored, resurrected. So those kind of products, like the paintings or the whiskeys or the cars or, even like these old remodeled houses, I think are super cool. And so there's nothing that it really ties together with me personally. Like I can't taste this. I mean, other than the old Crow that I used to drink, but there's nothing that I can taste with this and be like, yep, memory lane. But what I can
Mm-hmm.
do is appreciate it for what it's worth. Appreciate it
Yeah.
for exactly what it is and what it was intended to be.
Sure.
So, but my fifth and final one is 1792.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say the reason I love 1792 is because whenever I got back, I was deployed to Jordan in 19. I get back, and one of my first, I had gone to base, the kids and I, so we have this tradition when I get back from a deployment, I take the kids with me, the next day or the day after. And we go and I do a little bit of in processing because whenever you get back, in the Air Force at least, you have to in process and do all that. And so they sit in the truck. When I'm done that day, I go to the shopette. I get them an icy because that's the highlight of their day. And then we go. There's a place called Heritage Park, and what it is it's a park that it's about 3/4 of a mile long. And we go and there's different static displays of helicopters and airplanes and all these different things.
Yeah.
So we did that. We did our walk around. We're playing and looking and doing all that stuff. And on the way out, I go back to the shop and I look at a bottle of 1792. I was like, I don't think that I've ever had this before, but I'm going to buy it and try it. Super smooth, super good, awesome quality. And I still drink it now. I mean, this is 4 years later. I still drink it quite often. When I taste that, and I don't really know for sure that it tastes any different, but now that you've told me about the scientist thing, I guess it does make somewhat sense. There's something in there that tastes like, because I got back in July. Now, I don't know the season that this was distilled in and fermented in, where the grains came from, what year they were harvested, and whatever. I mean, I guess it'd have to be July if it was corn or around there. But I'm drinking this and I'm saying, when I drink this, or maybe it's just a psychological when I see the bottle, I think about getting off the plane, seeing my wife and kids coming back from deployment, going home, hugging everybody. So 1792 is like this homecoming, much like Kentucky Rare Breed or Wild Turkey Rare Breed. This last deployment when I came home, that's what she had for me. So those two, I guess. So I know you said five, but I kind of threw the sixth one in there. Those kind of remind me of homecoming. I'm a rule breaker, Bo.
I know you are.
Let's get
And
this.
I expected that. That's why I secretly had we're gonna do 6 bourbons, but only told you 5 because I knew you would sneak one in.
Did you trick me?
I tricked you.
You rascal.
Dude, on a serious note, 1792, I was at I'm a member of this Frankfurt Bourbon Society, and one couple of months ago we had this event where we had like these, I think it was 8, maybe 6 or 8. They laid out these 6 or 8 everyday drinking bourbons that you could find, and it was a blind taste test. And what you had to do was taste it and then write down what you think it was. And I am sad to say that I've always told myself that Woodford Reserve tastes so much different than anything, and I could pull Woodford Reserve out of any lineup. I didn't pick Woodford Reserve, so I'm disappointed at that. But I will say this: I did pick out 1792 because I always taste. Remember when you were a kid? When we were kids, and we had like the baseball cards, and they had that little strip of bazooka bubble gum or
Yep.
whatever. That the flavor was good for like 3 seconds, and then it was gone. But for that 3 seconds, that bubble gum was really good. I get that flavor out of 1792 distillate. For some reason, it tastes like bubble gum. And that night we had one of them tasted like bubble gum, and I said, "This has to be 1792. It has to be," and it was. And I just thought that was kind of funny that I could pull that out, but I always get that out of 1792. I mean, it's in a good way. I mean that in the best way I can. It's so good.
Do you think it was because you have that nose and that palate, or do you think it was because they dropped a piece of bazooka bubble gum in there?
Well, they probably. I think the gum was still floating in it, so I
Yeah.
knew that gave it away a little bit.
Yeah, and you were like, this is I got this. This is Bazooka Joe's, and they were like, you mean 1792? And you were like, yeah,
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I
yeah.
meant.
No,
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
But yeah, dude, I love 1792.
Yeah, that stuff is good. I think everything that and I know that our taste profiles, because I'm excited to see what you have to say. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that our taste profiles, I do expect to see, because for those of you that don't know and are listening, we haven't discussed which ones we're doing. So
Right,
your
right,
five
correct.
is completely different from my five, or at least I think. I don't know because we haven't talked about this. But I feel
Or
like
mine,
there's going to be a
mine
few.
could be exactly the same ones that you
It
have.
could be exactly the same. And knowing
Yep,
you, because you like to copy me a lot,
they probably are.
they probably are.
All right, man. Well, I enjoyed your list, and I look forward to hurrying up and getting through this so I can get to mine. Um, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
because it's all
Uh,
about you.
let's cheers. No, man, it's just good, man, and that's like I said when I texted you earlier last week or earlier this week, whatever it was, and I said, I have an idea. Let's just talk about some of the five or so bourbons that we're drinking on right now, and I think it's kind of important and cool to do that sometimes. So
Sure.
we can, we'll probably do this 2 months from now, and our list is going to be completely different because, like you said earlier, and I say this all the time, man, that's my favorite, and that's my favorite. I will say this: there are bourbons that I would never say that's my favorite.
Yeah.
They're some of them are terrible. I mean, some of them are good, and I would drink it, but I would just never say, man, that's my favorite. But these are, and you are like me. It's a lot of what I'm drinking is memories,
Yep.
and to me, whenever I'm drinking this, I'm either, because when I do a lot of my video work, like if I come to Arkansas and film, then I'm gonna pick up a bottle where we're filming, and then when I'm editing that, I'm drinking that. So it's like it's full sensory overload for me. And we'll talk about that probably next episode. But to me, I am drinking way more than just a liquid. And to me, a lot of times it's way more than just, ooh man, I taste vanilla and caramel, which I do get those notes and things, but to me it's much more than that. And so a year from now, when I'm tasting something, it brings me back to that time, and I get to relive that all over again. So
I
that
get the
to
same
me,
thing, dude.
that's
Like whenever I come up to visit you and like I buy like a bottle from Kentucky, dude, I'll go home and I'll drink that to forget the memories that like I had whenever we were together. So I fully
you drink to forget. Yeah,
drink to forget.
absolutely. I don't blame you. All right, man. Well, I love you, and I'm so glad that who was it that called and interrupted us in the beginning?
It was my friend, and I hope he watches this. It's Lance Franklin, that's his name, and he's
Yeah.
like my superintendent. And
Yeah, and I'm glad he took up like the first 45 minutes of our conversation. So thank him for us, and
I will. He
because
said
a good editor would take that out, but I'm certainly not going to
you're
take
not
that
gonna
out.
take it out.
No.
That's awesome. You should because he sucks.
All right, buddy. I love you, man.
I love you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
If you like what you heard tonight, check us out on these social media platforms. Just search for My Journey Through the American Spirits. Also, check us out on our new website,